It is undoubtedly a disappointing result for the most progressive party in Australian politics, left with at most just one lower house MP, with the Brisbane seat of Ryan still hanging in the balance. Joining me is the head of progressive think tank, the Australian Institute, Richard Dennis, to talk about where next for progressive politics in Australia. Richard, this story around the Greens is one of the most interesting coming out of this election. What do you make of the result?
Oh, it's a surprising result. I mean, it's obviously disappointing for Adam Bant, and Peter Dutton had an unexpected night as well. And I guess for me, it's important for everyone to remember there's no such thing as a safe seat in Australia anymore. We've seen huge swings in 2022, huge swings in 2025, and here in Canberra, the seat of Bean, one of the safest Labor seats, might fall to an independent. So I think what's really interesting here is that no member of Parliament can take their seat for granted anymore, no matter how big their margin or how high their profile.
The argument Labor people have made in the days since is that voters, they say, wanted action over argument, and they associated the Greens with being a party of protest, being a party of argument over, actually getting things done. Do you think that cut through?
Look, I think it's certainly cutting through that's what Labor's saying, but, most people don't take that much advice from their opponents. I think what's really interesting is the Green vote in the Senate, and of course it's in the Senate where the Greens had power in the last term, it's in the Senate where the Greens were holding up legislation. The Green vote in the Senate held up, but the Green vote in the lower house seats they held, that's where they had a small swing against them, and that small swing has cost them 3, maybe 4 seats. So I don't think the Greens will be sitting there thinking, why don't Australians like us anymore? Because their vote in the Senate suggests, well, they're going to wind up with balance of power, they're going to hold all their Senate seats. But I think the Greens are going to have to answer a harder question, and that is, how do they perform the role they perform in the Senate, and simultaneously try and get those grand coalitions required to hold lower house seats.
So, but do you think that the fights the Greens had over things like the Housing Australia Future Fund at the last Parliament, these sort of months-long arguments over, fairly complex bits of policy, but significant bits of housing policy, do you think that hurt the Greens in the end, the optics coming out of that they were perhaps obstructionist in some regards? Oh,
there's no doubt it upset some of their voters. I've heard it from some people directly, but I also heard a lot of younger voters and saw polling that suggests that a whole bunch of younger voters were like, yeah, someone's finally talking about renters. And this is the point. I think that the reason the Green vote held up in the Senate was that across the country, people were happy with them. But maybe they lost some groups by holding out on that housing policy, and maybe they won some other groups. But to win a lower house seat, you need 50% plus one right there in a particular seat. So, look, I mean, that's for the Greens to decide with their reviews going forward. But if overwhelmingly Green voters were really disappointed, you would have expected to see a swing against them in the Senate, and that's not what happened.
So would you advise them to change tact at all in the next Parliament? They will be in a significant position of power, holding the balance of power in the Senate. Would you advise them to carry on much the way they did last time around?
Look, I'll leave the political advice to them.
You watch a lot of politics, right?
I watch a lot of politics. Oh, no, I'll tell you what I think. I just, what they should do, that's up to them. But this is a Labor government with a big majority in the lower house. This is a Labor government with a big majority in the lower house with the smallest Liberal party in the Parliament in modern history. So there's a big progressive majority in the lower house, and for Labor there's 2 paths to get bills through the Senate. They can either work with the 11 votes the Greens have got, or however many votes the Coalition have got. But basically Labor can get whatever it wants through the lower house, and it can either make it more progressive in the Senate or more conservative in the Senate. Now, personally, as someone who looked at, in the past, Labor try to have a more progressive tax agenda and fail to get it up, try to have a more ambitious climate agenda and fail to get it up. They softened their own policies, they watered down their policies in order to get elected. Well, they've done that, and I don't think anyone thinks the Libs are going to win at the next election. So I think the big choice for Labor now is, do they use the Greens to strengthen up their reform agenda in the Senate, or do they do what they did in the last Parliament and use the Liberals to water it down? It was because the Corruption Commission didn't have public hearing because they wanted to go through the Liberals. The electoral law reforms, weren't so good for minor parties because Labor worked with the Liberal Party there. So I think that dynamic of Labor not needing anyone's vote in the House, but having two clear paths through the Senate, I think that's going to be fascinating. And if I were the Greens, I'd be looking at all sorts of opportunities to pull out good old Labor ideas that they've tried before and say, come on, Prime Minister, let's have a go at the policy you used to support.
Is there a political risk in that, though? Because, Anthony Albanese went to this election, Labor went to this election with a pretty clear agenda, and they've been clear since then that they want to stick to that agenda. Is there a risk in the Greens dragging them to the left by necessity of just trying to get anything through the Senate, and then perhaps Labor facing an argument in 3 years' time that, hey, you guys did a whole lot more than what you said you were going to do. This is a big surprise.
Yep, there's a risk. There's also a risk of not taking advantage of a once-in-a-generational opportunity. I mean, how has the coalition behaved when they've had the chance to get work choices through by one vote? They've grabbed it. How did John Howard behave?
Didn't necessarily pan out very well for the Howard governments, was it?
Work choices is still largely in place. Let's be clear, John Howard's ambition, his personal ambition, was to restructure industrial relations laws. Is it more important to stay in Parliament or more important to achieve your goals? Now, I don't know, I don't want to be in Parliament, but yes, if all Labor want to do is stay in Parliament, maybe you're right. Maybe they should just sort of sit there and not do very much. But let's be clear, in the last term, they spent 2 years saying we won't touch the stage 3 tax cuts, and reforming those stage 3 tax cuts is one of the most popular changes they made. No one suggests that they were punished either at the time or at the ballot box for shifting $80 billion worth of tax cuts from high-income earners to low and middle-income earners. And indeed, the day after they announced it, the Liberals said, fair call, we'll support it. Now, at the Australia Institute, we spent 2 years saying, here's good research as to why you should change the stage 3 tax cuts. A lot of people in this building were adamant, break a promise and you'll be gone forever. I think breaking that promise and explaining to the public why was one of the best things Labor did.
Just on that, and very briefly, you've argued for a long time in areas of tax policy like negative gearing, like increasing taxes on gas imports, that Labor does need to go further. Have those arguments now been run and won given this election result, or do you think there is still room there?
Peter Dutton went to this election saying, we don't have a shortage of gas, we're just exporting too much of it, why don't we tax gas exports? I couldn't agree more. Imagine if Labor were to show up and say, well, you know what we can do? We can tax gas exports and we can spend tens of billions of dollars on improving health and education. And if the Liberals want to vote against it, the Liberals can explain to voters why the Liberals don't want to tax gas anymore. Peter Dutton started this election campaign in his budget reply speech saying there's no shortage of gas, why don't we tax the exports? So there's lots of things that weren't talked about in the election that offer huge opportunities for Labor, not just to make Australia a better, fairer place, but to put a lot of pressure on the Liberals to put their votes where their mouth was.
Richard Dennis, really appreciate your time this afternoon. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching. If you'd like to keep up to date with all our latest research and work, sign up to our newsletter. Delivered every fortnight, it includes behind-the-scenes updates from Richard Dennis, an exclusive cartoon from Judy Horacek, details for our upcoming events and webinars, as well as explainers, graphs, and not to mention the latest cutting-edge research and analysis from the team here on the key issues that are facing Australia. Click the button on your screen to check it out.